Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I never thought I would die like this. Cold, alone, and choking on my own blood in a filthy alleyway. How poetic. The once beloved daughter of Su Yiken, the golden heir of Su Corporation, reduced to nothing more than a discarded corpse under the indifferent gaze of the city lights. I should have known. I should have seen it coming, but I was blind, naive, foolish enough to believe that family meant something. When my father died, I was too consumed by grief to notice the vultures circling. I had lost the one person who had truly loved me, the man who had protected me, who had always reassured me that no matter what happened, I would always have a home, a family, a place where I belonged. His death shattered my world, leaving me defenseless in a house that was no longer my own. Linger, don't be sad. We're still family. That was what Madame Wei told me, her voice laced with gentle sorrow, her hands warm as they clasped mine. She had always been an impeccable actress, her every word dripping with sympathy, her every touch designed to comfort. I had spent years convincing myself that she meant well, that her concern for me was real. But that day, something in her gaze unsettled me. A glint of satisfaction quickly masked behind the veil of maternal grief. The delicate scent of jasmine clung to her skin, once soothing, now suffocating. I should have recognized the deception in her soft-spoken words. I should have noticed the absence of true sorrow in her eyes, but grief had clouded my judgment, made me weak. I let her guide me to my father's study, let her sit beside me as the lawyer laid out a simple document before me. You need to sign this, Linger. It's just a formality to make sure everything stays within the family. A few strokes of ink, a small, seemingly harmless signature, that was all it took. I didn't even read it. I should have. Because by the time I lifted my pen from the paper, my entire inheritance, every last cent of my father's empire, belonged to them. First, I didn't understand. None of it made sense. My father had been a man of meticulous detail. He would never have left me with nothing. But when I demanded answers, Madame Wei's expression darkened, and one, the stepbrother I had once shared childhood summers with, stepped forward with the cold detachment of a man who had planned this moment long before my father's body had even grown cold. Don't make a scene, Su Ling. This is what's best for the company. I stared at him, unable to comprehend the betrayal. This was the same boy who had once picked flowers for me in the garden, who had sworn to protect me when I cried over scraped knees. And yet now he looked at me as if I were nothing, as if I had never meant anything at all. Before I could process what was happening, the next blow struck. The police arrived 3 days later. I remember the way they stormed into my father's office, the way Madame Wei gasped in horror as if she had no idea what was happening. We have a warrant for Su Ling's arrest. The charges, embezzlement, millions of yuan were missing from the company's accounts, and all evidence pointed to fake signatures, falsified transactions, also perfectly crafted that even I struggled to refute them. The trial was swift. The media was merciless. The once adored daughter of Su Yiken was now the country's most hated criminal, branded as a greedy, spoiled heiress who had stolen from her own father's legacy. I still remember the way we sat in the courtroom, his expression impassive as the verdict was read. I remember how Madame Wei pressed a delicate handkerchief to her eyes, weeping as she spoke of how heartbroken she was over my mistakes. The world believed them, and I was thrown away like trash. I spent 3 years behind bars, locked away while my so-called family enjoyed the wealth they had stolen from me. The Su Corporation flourished under Wei Jin's control. Madame Wei paraded herself as the noble widow of a great businessman, and the world forgot I had ever existed. There were moments when I thought I might break, when the walls of my cell felt too small, too suffocating. When the whispers of the guards about my stepmother's latest lavish purchases made me want to scream. But I held on. I told myself that the moment I was free, I would fight to take back what was mine. But they never intended to let me leave. The night of my release, the air was thick with the scent of rain. The streets slick and empty. I had nothing, no money, no home, no family waiting for me. My only possessions were the clothes on my back and the faint flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild from the ashes of my ruined life. I never saw the knife coming. Madame Wei sends her regards. The words were whispered against my ear as the blade plunged into my stomach, sharp and unforgiving. Pain exploded through my body, raw and excruciating. my breath hitching as warmth spread across my hands. My blood spilling onto the pavement. I staggered, my vision blurring, my knees buckling as I collapsed against the cold, unfeeling ground. I could hear footsteps retreating, the distant hum of the city continuing as if my death meant nothing. And maybe it didn't. Maybe I had always been meant to fade away, forgotten and discarded while my betrayers continued to thrive. But as the darkness crept in, as my life seeped out onto the asphalt, one thought burned through the haze of my fading consciousness. If I had another chance, I wouldn't be so blind. If I had another chance, I wouldn't just survive. I would burn them to the ground. And then everything went black. I wake up gasping, my lungs dragging in air as if I've been drowning for years. My body jerks upright, my fingers clutching at the soft silk sheets beneath me. Sheets that should not exist. This isn't a prison cell. This isn't the cold alley where I died. It takes me a moment to register the dim glow of the morning sun spilling through the wide bay windows, the familiar scent of lavender lingering in the air. My heart pounds violently against my ribs as I stare. My surroundings, my room, my old room. I scramble out of bed, nearly tripping over my own feet as I rush toward the mirror. The moment my reflection stares back at me, the breath in my lungs freezes. The face looking at me is not the gaunt, broken woman I had become in prison. There are no dark circles beneath my eyes, no hollowed-out cheekbones from years of malnutrition. I am young again. My skin is smooth, untouched by suffering. My hair falls in soft waves past my shoulders, healthy and thick instead of brittle and unkempt. I lift trembling fingers to my face. My mind screams that this isn't real, that I died, that I bled out, that I felt my life slip away. And yet I remember everything. The betrayal, the trial, the years in prison, the knife in my stomach. I squeeze my eyes shut, but the memories won't disappear. They coil inside me, vivid and undeniable, a weight pressing against my chest. I am alive, but not just alive, I've gone back. The realization slams into me with the force of a tidal wave. This is 10 years ago, before my father changed his will, before Madame Wei took everything from me, before I was stupid enough to believe in the love of a family that never existed. A slow, chilling sensation creeps down my spine. The universe, fate, God, whatever cruel entity that controls this world, has given me a chance to rewrite my ending, a chance to make sure they suffer. Instead, I press a hand to my stomach, half expecting to feel the phantom pain of the knife wound that ended my life, but there is nothing there. My body is whole. My mind, however, is sharper than it has ever been. I will not waste this opportunity. I force my breathing to steady, my mind racing through what I need to do. The old Su Ling, the naive girl who blindly trusted her stepmother's sweet words, is gone. This time I won't fight Madame Wei head-on. No, that would be too easy. If I attack her outright, she will only play the victim. She will twist the narrative like she always does, paint me as an ungrateful daughter, and win over my father's sympathy. That's how she operates. She thrives on deception. So I will let her believe she has won. I will let her dig her own grave. I will let her rewrite my father's will with her own hands, and then I will make sure every word she pens becomes her undoing. I exhale slowly and straighten my shoulders, forcing calm into my expression. I cannot act rashly. I need to be careful, calculated. As if on cue, a soft knock echoes from my bedroom door. Ling, are you awake? I know that voice. It's soft, warm, laced with the perfect amount of motherly concern, Madame Wei. For a brief, violent moment, every fiber of my being screams at me to rip that door open and slap the deceit off her face. But I don't. Instead, I school my features into something innocent, something she expects from me, the foolish, trusting stepdaughter she had manipulated so easily in my past life. I take a slow, steadying breath, then turn toward the door. Yes, Mother, you can come in. The words taste like ash on my tongue. I smile anyway because this time I will not be the prey. This time I will be the hunter. I have never smiled so much in my life. It feels unnatural, almost painful, to stretch my lips into something soft and obedient every time Madame Wei so much as glances in my direction. But I do it anyway because she expects me to, because she wants me to. I see it in her eyes, the quiet satisfaction of a woman who believes she has me exactly where she wants me. Every time I nod in agreement to her suggestions, every time I lower my gaze in deference, every time I say, "Yes, Mother," she grows more confident, more secure in the illusion that I am still the same foolish girl who once walked willingly into her trap. She doesn't suspect a thing, not yet. It isn't difficult to play the role she expects. All I have to do is erase the fire from my eyes, replace it with something softer, something weaker. I let my voice lose its edge, let my posture relax into something timid and unsure, as if I am still desperate for her approval. And I make sure my father sees it. I need him to believe that I have accepted my stepmother as my guide, that I trust her completely. Madame Wei has been taking such good care of me, father. I don't know what I would do without her. The words flow from my lips effortlessly, laced with just the right amount of sincerity. I see the way my father's expression softens when I say it, the way relief flickers across his face. He has always wanted peace in this household, and I am giving it to him, at least on the surface. What he doesn't realize is that with every grateful word I speak, he becomes more reliant on Madame Wei. He begins consulting her more in business matters, trusting her judgment, believing that she has only the family's best interests at heart. And that is exactly what I want. The beauty of my plan is that Madame Wei doesn't see it happening. She believes this is her victory, that I have finally yielded to her authority. What she doesn't realize is that power makes people reckless. The more my father leans on her, the bolder she becomes. The more he listens to her advice, the more confident she grows in her ability to influence him. And confidence, when paired with greed, is a dangerous thing. I watch her carefully during dinner conversations, noting the way she speaks now with more assurance, the way she suggests things with less hesitation. She is testing her limits, seeing how much control she can take without my father resisting. And he lets her because he trusts her, because I have made sure he does. But the one who falls for the act the hardest isn't Madame Wei. It's Wei Jinhai. My stepbrother has always been blinded by his own arrogance, convinced that he is smarter, sharper, better than me in every way. In my past life, I didn't see it for what it was. I mistook his confidence for confidence. Now I know better. Now I see him for what he truly is. A spoiled, entitled man who has never had to fight for anything in his life. He believes himself untouchable, not because setting her believe I've accepted her as my guiding figure. Madame Wei turns toward my father, placing a gentle hand on his wrist. Dear, perhaps Linger is right. It might be wise to revisit the will and ensure everything is in place. I take a small sip of my tea to hide my smirk. She's taking the bait. Of course she is, because this is what she's always wanted. To secure her hold over the Su family wealth, to ensure that not a single queen escapes her grasp. And now, with me seemingly handing her the opportunity, she won't be able to resist. My father exhales, rubbing his temple. I hadn't thought about it, but perhaps it is time. Madame Wei leans in just slightly. It would be a shame if anything happened and things weren't properly organized. She's setting the groundwork, already planting the idea of urgency in his mind. I almost want to applaud her. She really is as predictable as ever. I decide to push her further. Yes, I say, nodding in agreement. And I don't want there to be any confusion about my part in it. Honestly, I don't really care about the inheritance. The silence that follows is beautiful. My father blinks at me, startled. Madame Wei barely contains her glee, her fingers curling ever so slightly in delight. Even Wei Jinhai, who had been quietly scrolling through his phone, looks up in faint disbelief. I force a sheepish smile. I mean, I'll be fine, right? I have everything I need. I'd rather see the company and the family assets go where they're most useful. My father frowns. Linger, don't talk like that. You are my daughter. You? I cut in quickly, my voice soft and reassuring. I know you love me, father, but money isn't everything. I don't need a big inheritance to be happy. I say it so convincingly that I almost believe it myself. But the truth is, I'm lying through my teeth. I do want my inheritance. I do want my rightful place. But more than that, I want to watch Madame Wei destroy herself. And to do that, I need her to think she has already won. I watch as my father considers my words, torn between pride in my apparent selflessness and the natural instinct to ensure I'm taken care of. But before he can argue, Madame Wei seizes the moment. Suing is so wise beyond her years, she murmurs, her voice dripping with admiration. Not many young people would think this way. You've raised such a sensible daughter, dear. I barely keep myself from rolling my eyes. She's so transparent it's embarrassing. My father exhales heavily. All right, he finally says. I'll set up a meeting with my lawyer and go over everything again. And there it is, the exact words I wanted to hear. I press my lips together as if suppressing a pleased smile, then reach for another piece of fruit from the platter, pretending like this conversation hasn't just altered the course of fate. Madame Wei believes she's gained the upper hand. She thinks she has me exactly where she wants me. Naive, compliant, and uninterested in wealth. She has no idea that I am leading her straight to her own downfall. In life, Mr. Zhang had been nothing more than a quiet figure in the background. A diligent lawyer who had handled my father's estate with unwavering professionalism. But he had never stepped in when things went wrong. He had been there when I signed my life away, expression unreadable as my stepmother and stepbrother pulled the rug out from under me. He hadn't helped me then, but he also hadn't been the mastermind behind my downfall. He was simply a bystander. But this time I can't afford bystanders. I need allies, and Mr. Zhang. He may not realize it yet, but he is about to become one of my most important pieces on the board. I don't approach him directly. That would be too obvious, too suspicious. Instead, I let our interactions happen naturally, ensuring that he notices me in a different light. The first time I visit my father's office while he's reviewing estate matters, I linger just long enough to ask thoughtful questions. Mr. Zhang, how often do wills need to be updated? Is it normal for them to change frequently? He raises an eyebrow, probably surprised that I'm taking an interest in such matters, but he answers smoothly, testing me to see if I truly care or if I'm just asking out of idle curiosity. It depends, Miss Su. Some people keep the same will for decades, but others modify it as their circumstances change. A good estate plan considers all potential risks. I nod as if I'm taking his words to heart. That makes sense. I just worry about father, you know? I want to make sure everything is fair, that no one ever tries to manipulate him. I don't say who would do the manipulating. I don't have to. The implication is enough. The second time we meet, I slip in another carefully crafted observation. Father trusts you a lot, Mr. Zhang. I say warmly. It's good to have someone so principled in charge of these matters. Flattery is a dangerous tool, but when wielded correctly, it plants doubt in even the most neutral minds. If Mr. Zhang had previously been indifferent, he is now aware that I see him as a man of integrity. When the time comes for Madame Wei to rewrite the will, that small seed of doubt I planted will make him pay closer attention. When Madame Wei inevitably pushes my father to alter his will, she will make sure everything benefits her. What she won't realize is that Mr. Zhang will be watching. And when I innocently suggest certain protective clauses, conditions that will make it impossible for her to truly secure the fortune, Mr. Zhang will ensure they are included. The best part? She won't notice until it's too late. Madame Wei is not the only one who needs to fall. Wei Jinhai, my so-called stepbrother, is just as much of a threat. If I want to take back my life, I need to ruin him completely. Lucky for me, I know exactly how to do it. In my past life, Wei Jinhai stole a multi-billion project from Su Corporation, a venture into new energy solutions that skyrocketed his career and secured his power within the company. He hadn't built the success himself. He had taken it using inside information to sabotage the real executives working on it, then presenting the project as his own. I had been too naive then, too consumed with my own problems to notice how he rose so quickly. But now I know his weakness. He is not actually capable, and he thrives on deception, on manipulating situations to his advantage. But without someone guiding him, he doesn't have the intelligence to make the right calls. So I decide to use his own tactics against him. Through subtle conversations at family dinners, I start planting ideas in his head. Jinhee, have you been keeping an eye on the emerging overseas markets? I heard some very interesting things about new foreign investments. He barely acknowledges me at first, thinking I'm just rambling about something I don't understand. But when he later hears the same information, which I have strategically leaked through different channels, he starts paying attention. Then I make sure he gets the wrong information. I accidentally let slip some company insights that seem promising but are ultimately false leads. I speak just loudly enough for his assistant to overhear, knowing full well that the information will make its way to him. blinded by his arrogance and his belief that I am too stupid to know anything about business, takes the bait. He invests and he fails. But a few bad investments won't be enough. I need to completely destroy his credibility. So I begin recording everything. Through my connections with Mr. Zhang and a few trusted employees, I gather evidence of his shady dealings. The bribes, the fake expense reports, the embezzlement schemes he thinks are hidden. In my past life, all of this had been overlooked because my father had trusted him. But now, with me controlling the narrative, I ensure that these small crimes turn into massive scandals. I don't release the evidence immediately. No, I wait. I let him dig his own grave, let him believe he is untouchable, let him continue making stupid mistakes. And then, when the time is right, I will expose everything. When Hai won't just lose his investments, he won't just lose his credibility. He will lose everything, his position, his reputation, his future. And when that moment comes, when he finally realizes that I was the one pulling the strings, I will look him in the eye and smile. Greed makes people stupid, it makes them reckless. It makes them arrogant enough to believe they are untouchable. Madame Wei, for all her careful planning and cunning, is no different. For the past few months, I have been playing my role perfectly, obedient, naive, and seemingly indifferent to my father's wealth. I have smiled when necessary, agreed when expected, and subtly pushed her exactly where I need her to go. And now she believes she is ready to take the final step. She wants complete control. Madame Wei has waited long enough, and now that she thinks I am out of the way, she moves aggressively. She starts whispering to my father more frequently, bringing up concerns about the company's future, the need for stability, and the importance of securing the family estate before anything unfortunate happens. Ian, she murmurs, sitting beside him at the dinner table, her voice filled with false concern. I just worry about Linger. She's such a sweet girl, but she's too naive when it comes to business. If something happens to you, she won't know how to manage everything. Wouldn't it be better to ensure that someone more experienced oversees things? I don't even flinch at her words. I sip my tea, keeping my gaze downcast as if I'm too innocent to understand the conversation happening right in front of me. My father exhales, rubbing his temple. We've discussed this before. Linger is still young, but she has potential. I nearly smile. This is where my small, careful doubts have started to take root. Over the past few weeks, I have subtly questioned my father about trust, about how well he truly knows the people around him. I've spoken of disloyalty in business, of how people change when money is involved. And while I never said anything outright, I made sure he began looking at Madame Wei differently. But Madame Wei, blinded by her desire to secure everything, pushes harder. She pressures my father relentlessly, using gentle manipulation and strategic timing to catch him in moments of exhaustion. I just want what's best for the family, she says sweetly, holding his hand. We should finalize the estate plan soon, dear. You never know what could happen. Eventually, my father agrees to the new will, which is drafted and signed. Madame Wei practically glows with victory, convinced that she has won. She never thinks to question the details, never notices the carefully added clauses that ensure she will lose everything. She doesn't know that I have already secured my greatest advantage. Madame Wei is meticulous and careful. She has always read every contract, every document, every fine detail to ensure that she is in control. But greed makes people careless, and this time she is so blinded by her desire to take everything from me that she doesn't read the will carefully. Mr. Zhang, the lawyer I have carefully befriended and influenced, has made sure that an additional clause is included in the will. It is simple and elegant. It states that if Su Yan's death is deemed unnatural, all assets will automatically transfer to suing me, not Madame Wei or Wen Hai. Madame Wei, thinking that my father's death is years away, thinking that she has already won, and thinking that she is finally free to claim the fortune she has long desired, doesn't even see it. I continue playing my role flawlessly, acting unconcerned about the will. I nod and smile sweetly whenever she speaks of the company's future, of Wei and Hai's brilliance, and of how my father's choices are best for the family. I make sure she sees no threat in me, and that is exactly what pushes her to move too soon, because now she believes the only thing left standing between her and total victory is me. My father himself. She doesn't know that she has just walked into my trap, and when she finally makes her move, she will lose everything. The end comes faster than even I expected. For weeks, I have watched Madame Wei grow bolder, her patience wearing thin as my father's health begins to wane. She has been careful, slowly introducing small doses of poison into his evening tea, making his fatigue seem natural. At first, the changes are subtle. Slightly slower movements, occasional dizziness, a loss of appetite that the doctors brush off as stress. But I know better. I see the way she watches him, the way she carefully masks her satisfaction behind a veil of concern. She pretends to dote on him, making sure he takes his medicine every night, offering him meals that she personally prepares. No one questions it. After all, she has spent years playing the devoted wife. But she has forgotten one thing. I am watching her and I am always one step ahead. On the night she gives him the final dose, she acts as if nothing is out of the ordinary. She sits beside him at dinner, holding his hand, murmuring sweet nothings about how much she worries for his health. My father, trusting and tired, drinks the tea she has prepared for him, and this time he does not wake up. The next morning, the house is thrown into chaos as the servants discover the master cold and lifeless in his bed. Madame Wei, ever the actress, plays her part perfectly. She collapses in an exaggerated display of grief, wailing as if her heart had been ripped from her chest. But amidst the chaos, I do not cry. I had already set the next phase of my plan in motion hours before my father's death was even announced. An anonymous tip reached the authorities. A forensic analysis of my father's teacups revealed traces of a rare, slow-acting poison. Security footage from the kitchen showed Madame Wei personally preparing the tea every night. Footage that had been mysteriously overlooked for weeks, but was now conveniently delivered to the right hands. By the time the house was swarmed with police, Madame Wei still believed she had won. She believed she had secured everything. She had no idea that in just a few hours she would lose it all. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with tension. Madame Wei sat at the center of the room, dressed in an elegant black mourning outfit, her face a careful mask of sorrow. Beside her, Wei Jinhai lounged comfortably, already basking in his newfound power. He did not grieve. He did not even pretend to. He believed that this was the moment where everything ultimately belonged to him. I sit quietly across from them, my hands folded neatly in my lap and my face unreadable. The lawyer clears his throat and announces, as per the final wishes of the late Mr. Su Yiken, we will now go over the contents of his will. Madame Wei's lips curl into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. She glances at me briefly, as if savoring my supposed downfall. She doesn't know. She has no idea what's coming. The lawyer continues reading. In a steady and emotionless voice to my beloved daughter Su Ling, I leave. I see the moment Madame Wei's fingers twitch slightly and her composure almost slips as she registers the words. All assets, shares, and properties, including my control stake in Su Corporation. There's a sharp inhale and Wei Jinhai shifts and stiffens beside Madame Wei, whose smile falters. That must be a mistake, she says, her voice still level but noticeably tighter. The lawyer does not even blink.
No mistake, Madame Wei.
The will has been finalized under the presence of legal witnesses. Her hands tighten into fists, but she still believes she can recover. I see, but as his wife, I assume there are allocations for me. There it is, the confidence creeping back in. She still believes she holds power. She still doesn't understand. The lawyer barely glances at her as he flips to the next page. In the case of unnatural death or foul play regarding Su Yiken, all prior claims to inheritance from any parties aside from Su Ling shall be immediately revoked. The room falls silent. Madame Wei stops breathing. Wei Jinhai sits up straight, his brows furrowing in sudden panic. I meet Madame Wei's gaze for the first time that day, and I smile. Right on cue, the office doors burst open. 2 uniformed police officers step inside, their presence like a final nail in the coffin. Madame Wei, you are under arrest for the suspected murder of Su Yiken. You have the right to remain silent. The words barely register before she lunges out of her chair, desperate, furious, unraveling completely. No, this is a mistake. This is linger. Tell them you don't believe this. She still thinks she can manipulate me. She still thinks I am the weak little girl she once controlled. I stand slowly, tilting my head slightly as I regard her. The woman who ruined my past life. The woman who stole, betrayed, and murdered my father. I believe in justice, Mother. I say softly, my voice a deadly contrast to the chaos around us. And justice always comes for those who deserve it. Madame Wei screams as she is dragged away, her cries echoing through the halls. Wei Jinhai stumbles after her, his face drained of color as reality finally crashes down on him. I take a deep breath, the weight of my past finally lifting. I have won, and they will never touch a single cent of my father's empire. I have always believed that karma is not something that waits patiently for the afterlife. It arrives swiftly, precisely, and mercilessly. Wei Jinhai never saw it coming. For years he walked through life convinced of his superiority, wearing arrogance like a crown. He had everything handed to him. Connections, power, influence without ever lifting a finger. His success was never his own. It was built on lies, manipulation, and stolen efforts. And now I'm taking it all away. The first domino topples with the release of a single file, one that lands directly in the hands of Su Corporation's board members. Inside, undeniable evidence of Wei Jinhai's embezzlement. I had spent months gathering recorded conversations, forged documents, and wire transfers leading to shell accounts he thought were untraceable. But the most damning piece was a signed agreement detailing his misuse of company funds for personal investments. I had been patient. I had waited for the perfect moment. And now, with Madame Wei rotting in a cell, there is no one left to shield him. The fallout is instantaneous, and the media rips him apart. Headlines flash across every major financial network. Scandal in Su Corporation. CEO accused of fraud. The rise and fall of W.H. Hi, a legacy built on lies. An arrest warrant issued. How far did the corruption go? With the company's reputation in shambles, the board has no choice but to cut him loose. Investors pull out, shares plummet, lawsuits are filed at record speed. And then the final blow. The authorities arrive at his penthouse, handcuffs glinting under the chandelier light. He fought it, of course. People like him always do. You can't do this to me. I built this company, he roared, his voice echoing against the marble walls as officers restrained him. I'll come back from this, I swear. But no one listened. His mother was gone, his allies had abandoned him, and the company he thought would always be his, it belonged to me now. The world he once ruled crumbled around him, and I did not feel an ounce of pity. I waited exactly 1 month before visiting her. By now Madame Wei had lost everything. Her power, her wealth, her carefully constructed empire. The pristine image she spent years cultivating had deteriorated into nothing. She no longer wore silk dresses or expensive jewelry. There was no more perfectly styled hair, no more poised demeanor. The woman sitting in the corner of the dim prison cell was a shell of her former self. She heard my footsteps before she saw me. Slowly she lifted her head, eyes dull, lips cracked from dehydration. And when she realized who was standing before her, something inside her ignited. You did this to me. Her voice was hoarse, rough with the weight of sleepless nights. I didn't deny it. I stepped closer, watching as she flinched. The same woman who once held absolute power over me was now cowering in my presence. Did you really think you were the mastermind, Mother? I whispered, my voice soft, almost sympathetic. In the end, you were just a pawn. Her breath caught. I saw it the moment she realized the truth. She never had control, not really. I was always one step ahead. Every move she made, every decision she thought was her own, every scheme she set into motion had led her exactly where I wanted her to be. This entire time she thought she was playing the game, but the reality is I was the one moving the pieces. Her fingers tightened into fists, but there was no fight left in her. You'll regret this, she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. One day you'll see. You and I, we are the same. I smiled, the kind of smile she used to wear. No, I said simply, tilting my head. You lost because you were selfish. I won because I was smart. And with that I turn away. I do not look back as the cell door closes behind me. I do not spare her another glance. She is nothing now. And me? I have finally taken back everything that was rightfully mine.